We'll continue our introduction to the avoda of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. So until now, we've been discussing more or less the preparatory stages and the quarantine and where exactly is the Lishkas Farhedrin and what's its status. Now we have to really get into the issue of the avoda itself. And the first thing we want to do is to categorize the various karbonos, just simply a very, how should we say, a general, superficial introduction before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details about which karbonos have to be brought. So let's divide them up into three categories, and then we'll talk about the ketores. Okay, the first category are karbonos that belong to Klal Yisrael. We'll call them karbonos tzibur, the musaf, and then there's a par, an ayil, and shiva kvasim, all of which are brought as a carbon olah. And all of these are included in the generic term musaf. And again, as we go through this, we'll get into the details. We just want to get the facts on the ground. So we have the par, the ayil, shiva kvasim, and all of them have the status of a carbon olah. Then we have a chatos. Now, as far as the avodas HaKarban is concerned, we have one sa'ir lechatos on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. There's another sa'ir, but that's called avodas chutz, and that was sent over a precipice, la zozel. Okay, so these are karbonos that can be equated to karbonos that we bring the whole year round. Because sorry, lechatos is something that we find, for example, on Rosh Chodesh, and we have karbonos ola that are brought the whole year round. Now we get to stage number 2. And at this point, we're talking about karbonos that are unique to Yom Kippur. Amongst those karbonos that are unique to Yom Kippurim, we can break them down into 2 subcategories. One is karbonos of the Kohen Gadol himself, and sometimes the Kohen Gadol is bringing the carbon on behalf of all the Kohanim, and then we have karbonos that belong to the tzibur, but again, they're unique to Yom Kippur. So with regard to the karbonos of the Kohen Gadol himself, we again have a par and an ayil. However, it's not to be equated with the par and the ayil of the tzibur, because in the case of the Kohen, the par itself is not a carbon olah, like all of the musafim are, but rather it's a carbon chatos. So this is called paro shel Kohen Gadol, his own private par that he brings as a chatos. And it's a very famous entity in Masechta Yoma. It's called paro shel Kohen Gadol, and it's a carbon sa'ir. A par lechatos. The ayil, on the other hand, that he brings, which is called elo shel Kohen Gadol, is a carbon olah. However, we don't find a carbon olah in the case of a Kohen Gadol except for Yom Kippurim. The rest of the year, the carbon olah has nothing to do with the Kohen Gadol. And not only that, on Yom Kippurim itself, the tzibur brings a carbon olah. But now we're talking about an additional olah, additional ayil, which is not the same ayil that's brought by the tzibur, but rather the ayil that's personal and is brought by the Kohen Gadol. Now, what makes the par of the Kohen Gadol unique in the constellation of kodshim? After all, we said that the tzibur also brings a par, but it's a par liola. The par of the Kohen Gadol is a par lechatos, and its status is very unique. It's called miparim hanisrafim. There are very few of them, and this is a case of a par which is burnt. And there are various laws about how to do the sreifa and to what extent the Kohen Gadol has to be a participant in the actual sreifa of the par. So he writes here in this introduction, Evarov ubesaro nisrafim bebeis hadeshen michutz liyushalayim. Now, once we establish that the Evarim and the basar of this carbon, of this par lechatos, are burnt out of Yerushalayim, then you can bet your bottom dollar that the Kohen Gadol is not going to be part of the process of burning his own chatos, because the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim does not leave the Mikdash. In fact, we're going to have a whole sugya to analyze what's called Kriyas HaTorah on Yom Kippur back in the time of the Mikdash, because the Kriyas HaTorah took place in the Ezras Noshim, which, if you may recall that we discussed, it's not endowed with the status of the Azara, of the Kodesh. And we're going to have a whole discussion as to how the Kohen Gadol is allowed to leave the Azara and go into the Ezras Noshim in order to read the Sefer Torah. So now there's a Beis Hadeshen, which is located out of Yerushalayim, and that's where the par lechatos of the Kohen Gadol is going to be burnt. Okay, fine. There's something else that's also included in a chatos hanisrefes, meaning parma nisrafim, but that has to do with a carbon ola that's brought on behalf of the entire nation. But as far as an individual, the only case of parma nisrafim is the chatos, the par of a chatos of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And it's brought out to what's called the Beis Hadeshen, which is located outside of Yerushalayim, and that's where they're going to burn it. But I have one question for you. What makes this carbon into a carbon? And let me explain my question. Every carbon has to have usually two, or at least one of the two. It's either haktoras, or what we call achilas hamizbeach. The emurim are burnt on the mizbeach, and there's achilas adam in certain karbanos. The kohanim could eat, not in the olah, but in other karbanos. In a chatos, the kohanim, the zichrei kuna, would normally eat the basar of the chatos, but now we're saying that basar is taken out of Yerushalayim and the Beis Hadesh to be burnt. So what do we have left of this carbon? The answer is that although the basar and the evarim are taken out of Yerushalayim to be burnt in the Beis Hadesh, nevertheless the emurim are burnt on the mizbech. And here's a case of a carbon, I don't know of anything like it, where the entire thrust of the carbon, it's not an olah. Again, we're talking about a chatos. In an olah, forget it, everything is burnt on the mizbech. But we're talking about a chatos. And the straight for the chatos, in this case, is outside of Yerushalayim. So where's the kiyum carbon? And the answer is that the emurim will be burnt on the mizbech. What else? Now, he quotes a sugya that classifies the par lechatos, which is a par shenitzraf of the Kohen Gadol, as a chatos pnimis. Now, why is it called a chatos pnimis? I mean, after all, the basar and the Evarim are taken chutz l'Yerushalayim. So that's not pnimis, that's nothing's going on in the Heichal. And furthermore, the Emurim will be burnt on the Mizbeach HaChitonim. So why does the Gemara call it a chatas pnimis? And the answer is, again, because this chatas is very unique. It requires hazah. And the hazah has to be implemented in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That makes it into a chatas pnimis. So there's so many unique things going on with the Parashal Kohen Gadol. It's a par that's l'chatas, but it's not like the par of the tzibur, which is a korban olah. Number two, it's not like any other chatas, which is eaten l'zichrei kuna, because anything that they normally would be eaten l'zichrei kuna is taken out of Yerushalayim and burnt in the Beis Hadeshen. And it's unique in the fact that although almost the 99% of the korban is taken outside to be burnt, but the emurim will reach the mizbeach. And the most unique aspect of the Paro Shel Kohen Gadol is that the hazah takes place in the Kodesh Kadosh. And for that, we really have to know more about hazah and how hazah's dam works. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in this Mesifta, there's a picture. Let me just see if I'm right. Okay, he has a picture of hazah. But that's not the hazah we're talking about. All right. Now, a chatos during the entire year is brought by Kohanim, and if the Kohen Gadol would decide, which he has the option to do, that he wants to do the avodah of the Karban Chatos during the entire course of the year, he will wear Big Day Zav, which means the 8 begadim of a Kohen Gadol. Not so in the case of Chatos Par Shel Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. Here's a chatos, again, if we're talking about the unique dimensions of this chatos, where the avodas hakarban will be done by the Kohen Gadol wearing Big Day Lava. He says, ha'ayil, right? We mentioned that the Kohen Gadol brings not only a par lechatos, but also an ayil li'ola. Ha'ayil karev b'ofen ha'krav shel kol yemos hashana b'Big Day Zav. Again, the Kohen Gadol the whole year round, when he did the avodah, he wore Big Day Zav. When he brings his own ayil li'ola, he will wear Big Day Zav, the same 8 begadim that he wears the whole year round. But when he brings his chatos, which is a par, here he's wearing Big Day Love. He's only wearing the 4 begadim, which are worn normally by a Kohen hedge. Okay, now we want to study the Karbanos Hatzibur, which are unique to Yom Kippur. Until now, we discussed the Karbanos Hatzibur, which will be brought on Yom Kippurim as a reflection of other days of the Jewish calendar, and that was the Par, the Ayil, and the Shiva Kvasim, which are all brought as a Karban Olah. But on Yom Kippurim, and we could call it the centerpiece almost of the entire Avodas Hayom, are the Shnei Seirim. And these are Karbanos Tzibur that are meant to bring and effectuate the kapara of Itzumo Shel Yom of Yom Kippurim. Sar Echad Lashem, Hakarev Chatos, V'Sar Echad Lazazah. Hasarev karev lashem harei b'chlal seirim hanisrafim. Okay, we have such a concept as seirim nisrafim throughout the entire year. A rarav hu b'saro nisrafim b'beis hadesh chutz mishalayim milvad a murav. So those are the seirim the whole year round, and the seir lechatos, sorry lechatos, which is lashem on Yom HaKippur. Now, however, now we have a second soyer, and that's going to be sent lazos. The soyer lashem is called chatos pnimis because once again, the soyer lashem is unique only in this one dimension. That is hazos dam bekodesh kadosh, and that gives it the status of a chatos pnimis. And the other dimension is in terms of the Kohen Gadol, who's bringing the soyer lechatos pnimis on behalf of Klal Yisrael, and he's going to wear big day lavan, whereas during the rest of the year, as we mentioned earlier, he would be wearing big day zav. So basically, we could summarize that if you're asking the question whether or not the Kohen Gadol will wear the big day zav that he wears the whole year round, all 8 begadim, or 4 begadim with big day lavan, the answer is: are you dealing with a carbon that's unique to Yom HaKippurim, or is it a carbon that overlaps on Yom HaKippurim, but it's not unique to Yom HaKippurim? So, for example, when we spoke about the musaf of Par, Ayil, and Shiva Kvasim Li'ola, there the Kohen Gadol is wearing big day zav, because those are karbanos that will be, the avod of which will be implemented by the Kohen Gadol on behalf of the tzibur. But these are karbanos that are brought the whole year round, and therefore he wears his big day zav like he does the whole year round. But when we get to the paro shel Kohen Gadol, which is a unique carbon because of Kohen Gadol, and for that matter, if we're talking about the ayali ola of the carbon of the Kohen Gadol, which is also a unique carbon to Yom HaKippurim, he will be wearing his big day lavan, and the same halach will apply to the soyer lashem, which is brought on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael, which has a unique avoda in hazah kodshim, but now we're adding that the Kohen Gadol is going to wear big day lavan. Why? Because it's the unique carbon to Yom HaKippurim, and any additional karbanos that are brought on Yom HaKippurim above and beyond any other regel are worn. The Kohen Gadol wears his big day lavan, and then we get to the ketores. The ketores on Yom HaKippurim is a very unique avoda, radically different than the ketores the whole year round. And therefore you can guess, without even blinking your eyes, that the Kohen Gadol during the ketores is going to be wearing big day lavan. But the truth is that the Kohen Gadol would be wearing big day lavan for a different reason. And that's because the avoda of haktoris is lifnai v'lifniv. It's in the Kodesh Kadoshim. And anytime he goes into the Kodesh Kadoshim, he wears big day lavan. When we spoke about big day lavan for the soyer lashem, or for the two unique karbanos of the Kohen Gadol, the par lechatos and the ayali ola, in those cases, even when the Kohen Gadol is doing the avodah out of the Kodesh Kadosh, we're not yet ready for the Hazah, nevertheless, he's going to be wearing big day lavan. In the case of the ketores, he's wearing big day lavan for two reasons. Number one, because it's a unique avodah generated by Yom HaKippur. Number two, because it's lifnai v'lifnim. And let's keep in mind, a lot of people don't remember this, that the ketores, the aktoris of Yom HaKippurim lifnai v'lifnim does not replace, substitute for the aktoris of every day of the year. It's in addition to the aktoris of the whole year round. So the Kohen Gadol has a very busy schedule, because not only is he going to be up front doing the avoda that normally would be done on any day of the year, he's also up front doing the unique avodos of Yom Kippur. So for the Aktoras Haktores of any day of the year, which he does also on Yom Kippur, he's going to be wearing big days off. But when he gets to the Aktoras Haktores, which is Lifnai V'Lifnim, the unique avoda of Yom Kippurim, which is done in a different way than Aktoras Haktores all year round, he wears his big day lava. All right, so let's take a break now here. And we just turned to Daf Gimel here in this, if you have this text, and we're up to Ofen Hakravasa. That's where we'll pick it up in Mitzvah Hashem